Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Robert from mobileburn, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the iPad versus the Nexus 7. You can see both devices in front here, and first of all I wanted to talk a little bit about the hardware specs. But before I get into anything, I want to say thank you very much to EE, UK's only 4G network, for supplying me with the iPad mini to review and compare to the Nexus 7. So first of all, the iPad, you can see in front of me here, the iPad mini, shall I say, comes in 16, 32 and 64 gigabytes flash storage sizes. This is non-expandable. Then it comes in white and black. I currently have the white version. You can see it's got a silver back, and then obviously at the top is the white antenna, and then the front is white. Then it comes in iOS 6.1, which is the latest version I've recently updated to, and it's also powered by a dual-core A5 1 GHz processor with 512 megabytes of RAM. The display is a 1024 by 768 7.9 inch on the diagonal LED display. It gives it a pixel density of 163 pixel per inch. The cameras on the back is a 5 megapixel shooter with an aperture of f2.4, and it shoots 1080p video. On the front here you can see is a 1.2 megapixel front facing camera, and it has 720p. Also the battery, which is underneath, is a non-removable 4490 milliamp hour battery. And this is the 3G or 4G version, shall I say, and you can also have the Wi-Fi and only version as well if you prefer that. Weight, it weighs about 312 grams the 3G version and 308 grams for the Wi-Fi version. And you can see here for size, it barely fits into my hand. I do have fairly large hands, and it just about fits into my hand to be able to hold it comfortably. I do have to stretch quite far to be able to hold it. And looking around the device, you can see on the right hand side of the device you have the rotation lock / mute switch, as well as the volume up and down buttons. Then you get the SIM card slot, which is not on all devices, obviously depending on if you have a 3G or a non-3G version. On the bottom you have the lightning port connector as well as speakers, and then on the left hand side you get absolutely nothing, which is completely clear. And then at the top you get the power button here, then obviously the 3G radio built in here, and then the 3.5mm headphone jack. As I've shown you before already, the 5 megapixel camera on the back here, the logo, shiny logo on the back, as well as the iPad branding down the bottom. And that pretty much is it. Now let's talk a little bit about the Nexus 7 and its specs. So this is the Nexus 7, and it comes in 16 and 32 gigabyte versions. And it comes in black only. It runs Android 4.2.1 and is powered by a 1.3 GHz quad-core Tegra 3 processor. It has 1 GB of RAM, so it pretty much has double the performance, or power shall I say, compared to the iPad mini. The display is a 1280 by 800 display, 7 inch on the diagonal, and it's an IPS LED display, which gives it a pixel density of 1216 ppi. There is only a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera and no rear camera, and the battery is a 4325 milliamp hour battery. It also comes with 3G, so no 4G on these devices, only 3G, but it also has NFC built in, which is the near-field communications chip to send pictures and videos and files across very quickly to other enabled NFC devices. The weight is a little bit heavier than the iPad, which is 340 grams. Size-wise, feels a lot more comfortable to hold. It's a little bit smaller, obviously due to the 0.9 inches less in terms of screen real estate, and also the Nexus 7 is actually a 16:9 display compared to the 4:3 display on the iPad mini. Then looking at the buttons as well, so on the right hand side of the device you get the volume rocker as well as the power button here, and they're in a nice comfortable position. At the top it's pretty much empty apart from a microphone here, and then on the other side there is only the pogo pins and then another microphone. On the bottom, you get the 3.5mm headphone jack, the micro USB charging cable, the ASUS branding and the Nexus branding, and then sort of this textured back, and then the speakers right down the bottom. Obviously, as I said already, no camera on the back. Let's now talk a little bit about the iPad software features. So first of all, you get presented with the lock screen, which is the same as every other iOS lock screen, just sort of slightly enlarged. You have the clock, the slide to unlock button here, and then you also get access straight to the gallery. But just going to unlock now. That gives you the standard user interface. And one thing I wanted to get into straight away is the keyboard. I really like the split keyboard. So you just swipe across using the gestures, or swipe open to unlock the keyboard, or sort of separate the keyboard depending on how big your hands are. Also, what I like are the gestures you get now. So you get 4 fingers, swipe up for multitasking, give you access to your shortcuts down here. So straight away all the multitasking is open. And also, if I was to open, for example, the App Store, if I wanted it again, and close it, you can use 5 fingers to swipe, sort of to pinch in and close it. Let me open it again. And now 4 fingers actually allow you to go into different open multitasking applications. So a nice feature there again, that you don't need to use the home button to get back to it and then open it, or double tap or triple tap it. Siri works just as expected. You just press and hold the button and that opens it. You still get the button where you double tap the home button and it opens the multitasking application, so no problems there. So like I said, the gesture's mostly the same as you get on the new iPads as well. This is obviously the new iOS features that have been enabled, so rather than having to use the button. Now let's have a look at the Nexus 7 software features, and you can see Android 4.2.1 has brought some new improvements. So you get the lock screen here, which has the unlock button in the middle, and you can also go straight into search by swiping up from this little dotted circle. So you can just swipe up and that takes you straight into search. But other features include widgets that can be included onto the home screen. So you just click the plus button here, and then you get presented with all kinds of widgets that you could install on the lock screen. You can, for example, just choose BBC News, top stories, and you get presented with the latest stories on your lock screen. Here you can see the latest BBC story, which is a really nice feature, and you can just swipe across between different lock screens, and you get presented with different widgets depending on what you have installed. But now unlocking it, the keyboard, I've actually installed SwiftKey, which is a third-party keyboard, but I'll also switch back to the standard keyboard and show you some of the features on it as well. So this is the standard keyboard you get, and you get the swipe gestures as you get on every nowadays 4.2.1 version of the keyboard. So your Nexus 4, your Nexus 10, all those have the swipe feature enabled. You can also do normal typing, but you do not get the split key as you do on the iPad, the split keyboard. And even going into landscape mode, there you can see it doesn't allow that either. So you do need to use the whole screen to type, rather than sort of having it on either side like the iPad mini does. But the reason I installed the custom keyboard was to show you that in landscape, using SwiftKey tablet, it does give you the split layout here, so you get it a bit like the iPad mini. Again, this is a paid version of the keyboard, but that's the best way, or the nearest you can get to that iPad mini keyboard in terms of typing, because that's something I really like. But Android, it runs its custom launchers, custom widgets, stuff like that can be installed, compared to the sort of iOS interface, which is the same as you've known and loved for years. So let's switch over to the iPad now and unlock it. You just get the usual home screens with all the buttons and the layout, and you can just add our widgets, our icons, to the home screen. You also get your navigation bar from the top to swipe. So it just works as it always has, and just apart from the icons now that you can have more in the dock, but otherwise it's exactly as it always has been. And like I said already, on the Nexus 7 you do get your widgets and stuff like that can be custom installed by just long pressing widgets, and then you go into the widget drawer here and you can install different ones. So if you wanted, I don't know, a Google search widget, you could just have it there and then straight into search from that. Now, talking a little bit about the screens on both devices, the saturation on the Nexus 7 is probably not as high as it is on the iPad mini. I'll try and see if that's visible in the camera, but you can already see the colors are much more vibrant, much more visible on the iPad mini. You know, I'll try and hold them up a little bit closer and show you that a little bit better here. And the iPad mini, like I said, already much more vibrant, much more powerful colors, sort of, you know, like almost like AMOLED displays compared to the Nexus 7. Viewing angles, pretty much the same on both devices, nothing unusable. You know, you can pretty much use the iPad to any angle you want, so most applications will work. You know, whatever features you're running, say you're playing a game which requires a lot of tilt, you know, you're not going to have any problems playing that game. The same with the Nexus 7, you can see here I can tilt it pretty fine, you can still read the text, so no problems there. Now let's compare the browsers quickly. Let me actually try and swipe in and see how quickly, you know, scrolling works, and, you know, double tapping and stuff like that. Double tapping works fine. Text rendering, no problems, really quick, really fine. You know, as you'd expect nowadays, browsers aren't really going to be lagging a lot. They're going to be working just as they're supposed to. Now let's have a look at the Nexus 7. You can see here, double tapping, swiping, you know, scrolling, all that works exactly the same. Maybe screen responsiveness seems a little bit better on the iPad mini, but otherwise, you know, exactly the same, and no problems running both here. Now I'm going to run a benchmark called Geekbench, and the only reason I'm running both is because it's available on both platforms. That's the only one I found that seems to be running. I'm just going to close all the applications in the iPad mini, and also I'm going to close all applications on the Nexus 7 to sort of give it the fairest possible comparison, and then I'm going to just come back to you when it's running. So you can see no applications running in the background. The same with the iPad and Nexus 7, no recent apps. And I'm just going to run the program called Geekbench, and I'm going to do Geekbench first, Geekbench 2, and then the next thing we're going to run is GPU Mark, which tests the graphics performance of both devices. So there you go. I'm just going to press Run Benchmark on both, and I'll come back to you with the scores once they're in. So the scores are in, and you can see it here, 1429 on the Nexus 7 and 757 on the iPad mini. You know, take these scores as you want. You know, this could mean that, I don't know, the programs are more optimized on Android than they're on iPad. This could mean that they are the same, optimized the same, but the you know, Nexus 7 has the dual core, or sorry, the quad core, the 2 cores more, as well as the 512 megabytes more. So, you know, I'm not gonna talk to you about the scores too much, to be honest, because it's just a number and it doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't, you know, tell you how fluid a UI is or anything like that. But next, what I'm going to run is I'm going to run GPU Mark, which tests the GPUs obviously of both devices. So there we are. I'm about to run it. I'm just going to click GPU benchmark on one as well as GPU benchmark on the other, and then I'm going to run it and come back to you when the scores are in. So the scores are in. You can see the Nexus 7 is a little bit more powerful than the iPad mini. The score on the Nexus 7 is 3247 and it's 2838 on the iPad mini. Isn't much of a difference, to be honest with you. I've had a look at the frames per second and stuff, and the scores, the sort of the average scores, there isn't much difference, and you know, either of them will run any game pretty well. I've played Need for Speed on here, I've played a few other games on here, and they seem absolutely fine, and I've had no lag or stutter on either devices. So really, to summarize, they're both very, very good devices. You're not going to be disappointed with one or the other. The only difference you might want is, for example, portability. The only reason you might want to, for example, the Nexus 7 is, you know, it's slightly smaller and it has higher resolution pixels, so the screen's going to be slightly better, but you're not going to notice pixels on either. Also, if you're used to, for example, the iOS environment and iTunes and have all that on the cloud, you know, do use the iPad mini, you're not going to be disappointed, because the fluidity, the speed and at which it works, you know, it's absolutely fine. There's no lag or stutter. You know, equally well, the Nexus 7, absolutely fine on both devices. You know, you're not going to notice any lag or any slowdown, especially since 4.2.1, the introduction of Project Butter on Jelly Bean. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this comparison between the two devices here, the 7-inch and the 7.9-inch iPad mini. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them down below. Feel free to subscribe for more content. Feel free to like the video. Thank you very much for watching.